Welcome to Ecstatic Yoga. I am Grace. So happy you are here today. We are going to be talking about choreography, sequencing, and pace in a yoga class. We're actually going to start with sequencing and then go into pace and then go into choreography. So happy you are here. So creating yoga classes is an art. And it takes time and practice to develop. However, even beginners can become very competent yoga instructors when the mindfulness of choreography and sequences and pace are able to be fit together into a theme and an inspiring intention that you've set for your class. Eventually, weaving flows with sequences of poses in a pace that works for your class with an intention that inspires. You will become a great choreographer of yoga classes. So let's talk a little bit now about sequencing. So choosing sets of poses to sequence together for a class will depend on the theme of your class, the intention of your class, and the ability of your students. However, the general rule for sequencing yoga poses, sequencing one pose to the next pose to the next pose, is to create a flow, and a flow that is aligned with your intention. So let's talk about flow. Creating flowing sequences, stitching one pose to another in a natural flowing practice, assists the student to go within and remain meditative and inwardly reflective during the practice. So in other words, if your poses are flowing and natural and they're able to move from one to the other, the student is able to maintain a meditative focus. We share flows with you to offer you, our students, some variations of poses to add to these flows, to integrate and create ease as you transition from one pose to the other. So we have the Sun Salutation C, Surya Namaskara C, the Virabhadrasana warrior flow, and a floor flow. We have a hip opener flow, and then we have some variations you can put into those. And you're free to use all the information and flows that we offer you, or you can creatively offer new flows to your students, or use the ecstatic flows and just create a little variation inside of them. That's what I do. I have the main flows, and I'm always creating a little variation inside of each of them. And that just helps me to have a little bit of structure and then create a little variation and a new theme. So when creating a flowing sequence, each pose sets up an easy transition to the following pose. It is best to include standing poses together into a flow, and then floor poses together into a flow, with maybe a transition pose like down dog or standing yoga mudra or wide leg forward fold. So we can smoothly go from standing to floor or floor to standing. For example, a child's pose to an up dog flow is very natural, very flowing. Child's pose can also flow into a single leg forward fold. That's nice flow. Or into a balancing bear or a boat. With ease and with grace. However, if you created a flow with a camel, then a bridge, it would be a little bit more less flowing, because you'd be on your knees, you'd be up onto your knees, and you need to get all the way moved so you're all the way down on your back for your bridge. A solution to this would be to add a pose in between, like spinal rocks, and that would get you right down on your back and you'd be ready for bridge. So that would allow a more flowing transition. Or if you went from bridge to a mountain pose, that would create even less flow and more disruption, because you would need to go all the way from the floor on your back in a supine position, all the way back up to standing position in mountain. In this case, you could either include your mountain earlier in your practice during your standing poses, that's what I would do, or add a few poses to aid the transition. But to go all the way from bridge to mountain, you're going to need to probably add more than one. So one of the possibilities is you could go to bridge, you could bring your knees to the chest, roll up to your knees onto camel or to table. From table, you can move to down dog and then move into forward fold and finally into mountain. So transitioning gracefully from a standing flow to a floor flow. I've got kitty cat here in my eyes. My kitty cat is shedding in the spring. Hi, Dandy. Is using forward flows, lots of forward folds and down dogs are really good transitioning poses. So a forward fold, a wide leg forward fold, down dog, standing yoga mudra, these are all forward folds. Our favorite transitioning poses from standing and down to the floor. They're all folds, and when you're in a fold, whether it's wide leg or just a regular forward fold or a down dog, your hands are right there already down on the mat. And so then you can just bend the knees down, come into a table or a camel, and come down to a seat. With standing yoga mudra, your head's down, you can just release those hands and bring them down to the mat. Those are all great transitioning from standing down to the floor. All right, so down dog is also a great transition pose that can provide a gentle transition from standing to floor by simply bending the knees down to the floor and moving into table or child's pose or seated position. Transition gracefully from a floor flow to a standing flow using table or down dog. So table is a floor pose. You're already down on the floor in your hands and knees, your knees and your hands, and it moves you very easily into down dog. Just pressing into the feet, straighten the legs, and lift that tailbone, and all of a sudden you're in down dog. And this can be used, and down dog is used in many standing flows. So you're already up and you can move into forward fold. You can move back into a warrior, a lunge. And so it's a great transitioner from floor to standing and from standing to floor. In table, if you're in table pose, we just talked about that. It's really easy. Just curl those toes under, lift the knees off the mat, straighten the legs, and you're in down dog. So poses to prepare the body. In planning your sequences, you can add preparatory poses to assist students to move more easily into a final pose, especially if it's a little more challenging, kind of warming up the body. So below are some examples of preparatory poses for forward folds and back bends. So in forward folds, to warm up the body for a forward fold, you can use Virasana Hero's pose, and this can prepare the knees for forward folds. Some modifications for Virasana Hero's pose is you can use a blanket or cushion under the sits bones or between the calves and hamstrings. So cow face pose, Kamukhasana. This can prepare you for a forward fold. Opens up the shoulders, creates mobility in the upper spine, and your forward fold sometimes can be restricted if you have tightness in the upper back. So this can help loosen up that upper back for your forward fold. The modification is you can use a strap between your hands if your hands, and then Supta Padangasthasana, reclining big toe pose. This offers stretching of the hamstrings to prepare for deeper stretching in forward fold. And this one, you can also use a strap around the foot of the raised leg for a modification. And so some forward folds. That's Uttanasana, which is our forward fold. Parvattanasana is pyramid pose, which is also a forward folding pose. Adho Mukha Savasana, our downward facing dog. And some variations with down dog is you can walk the dog, you can move into three-legged dog, and you can move into some of the seated forward folds, single leg forward fold, double leg forward fold, wide leg forward fold. Let's move into back bends. Some back bends require open hips, shoulders, and a flexible spine, and a nice long front body as you're bending back. So below are some warm-ups to move gently into deeper back bend poses, some preparatory poses for back bend. Back bends are good preparation for shoulder stands also. So again, our upward facing dog is a really good preparation. Urdhva Mukha Savasana. This is a great opener for the back bend. It is a gentle back bend and arches the back and extends the spine. And with this modifications, you can use blocks. You can place your hands on the blocks rather than the earth. And bow pose is an intermediate back bend while laying on the belly. And this one you can also use straps a few inches from the ankles you need. And Ustrasana or camel. Before moving deeply into camel, move into a gentle camel where the hands are on the small of the back, the chest is open, and the back is bending gently. The spine is extending, the head is in line with the spine, the chest is open and lifting up towards the spine. We don't want to drop the head down, we want to drop it back, keep it in line with the spine. After a few breaths in this gentle camel, you may be ready to bring your hands down to your heels for a deeper back bend in camel. The modification is to bring the toes up. So the heels come up, coming up onto your toes. And I love this one. When I found out about this one, I always use it. So you come up onto your toes to bring your heels higher up so your hands don't have to go quite so far down. And they're closer to your hands. It's like you're bringing the floor up. And of course, we move into our bridge pose. And a nice warm-up is half bridge. And it is a great preparation where you lift the hips halfway and just hold for a moment. And in this, you're not arching your back. You're into a half bridge. However, your knees are up and the feet are hip width apart. Arms are resting alongside the body. After a couple half bridge poses, you can move into your faux bridge. Your back will be very ready. And you press into the feet, lifting those hips and arching the back while bringing the shoulder blades underneath you, coming in onto your shoulders and clasping the hands together underneath your body. And you can place a block between your knees to kind of train those knees to stay hip width apart. And the feet will always stay hip width apart, but sometimes those knees start to want to bend out, but we want to train them to stay hip width apart. So even just using a block a couple times can really train those muscles to stay aligned. And then Cobra is a really good back bend, and we can practice baby Cobra before moving into a full Cobra. So let's talk about some twists. Twists are great counter poses for forward folds and back bends. So if we're doing forward fold or a back bend, one of the things we can do is a counter pose is, if we're doing forward folds, is to do some sort of a back bend. So we bring the knees into the chest, and that is a great counter pose. And if we're doing a back bend, it's nice to go into a forward fold. But another option are twists. This is your sequencing your classes. They're great for digestion, detoxifying and vitalizing the internal organs. You'd be twisting your spine so it's like wringing a rag, especially when you're got the head moving in one direction, everything moving, and you're just squeezing out the toxins. Twists keep the spine really healthy and flexible. So below are some popular twists that can be used after forward folds and back bends when you're planning your sequencing. So revolved triangle pose. That's always nice to do after a triangle, but you can add that in at any time. Parvita Trikonasana. And then Eagle Garudanasana is a great twist. Seated spinal twist, Marichasana 3. Supta Matsyendrasana, supine spinal twist, is a really good one. And all of those are really good. So counter posing, let's just talk a little bit about that as you're sequencing your practice, your flow. It's an important principle in flowing sequences to add some counter posing into the flow. So like we had said, after practicing a back bending, adding a forward fold, a twist, a knees to the chest, it's really beneficial after extension, back bend of the spine to offer twist or flexion, a forward fold to neutralize and release any tension in the lower spine. After twisting to one side, a great counter pose is a micro twist to the other side. Even if you're going to go to the other side, but especially if you've already gone to the other side and you're not going to, still add that little micro twist. If you bend the side body to the left, balance the body by bending the side body to the right. Another invitation is to include a yin break with a child's pose or a downward facing dog after a series of yang poses or power poses. This adds some restorative aspects to even a yang flow and doesn't push or burn out students. Yoga builds strength. However, it is not about forcing and striving, and always ultimately about connecting to the inner being, allowing and restoring. So intention, let's talk about intention. When choosing poses for a yoga class, you'll first want to set an intention for the class. For example, a hip opening class will hopefully include some hip openers. A yin class will flow a little slower and have more floor and restorative poses. A strength building class may have some standing, balancing, deeper squats and goddess. A children's yoga class may include some animals, dog and cat, and inviting the kids to bark and meow as they go into the poses. Elderly students, if you have an elderly class, you'll want to create some sequences or poses that are very different than the youth. They'd be more restorative and easy. An evening class, you may have some effort at the beginning, but make sure to wind down and be very gentle towards the second half of class because it's evening and people would be going to sleep soon, so you don't want to leave them all revved up. So there are many, many intentions, and as many intentions as there are sequences to weave together. And we'll be talking about some themes in a moment. So let's talk about pacing. So as we create our yoga classes, we want to think about pace. And depending on the theme and the intention, this will dictate our pace. Also, your students' level of skill in the yoga class, and the environment have an influence on your pace. So take some time when creating a flow to think about the intention you want to create, whether it's invigorating, relaxing, mindfulness, strength. If the intention and theme is based on an active or stimulating class, the pace will be faster and more upbeat. If you're wanting to promote stillness and relaxation, you'll offer a slower pace. The overall important thing to consider in teaching a yoga class, whether power yoga or restorative, is a steady and consistent pace. Sometimes we need to adjust according to environment. For instance, we planned a class, we wake up, but it's a cold morning and the yoga room is very, very cold. So we may want to ditch those very slow warm-ups and move right into some more invigorating warm-ups and a sun salutation so everybody doesn't freeze. If it's damp and a rainy afternoon, you didn't expect rain, but everyone comes in a little tired, you may want to ditch the active class and honor the mood and move into a more restorative class to match the mood of that rainy day. So never be so attached to your pace and your planned sequences that you cannot shift and adjust when appropriate. And also, depending on the students that arrive to your class, you may need to be flexible in your pace and your sequences as well. It's important while teaching a yoga class to be aware of the students in the class. Be observant of the students, which will give you an idea of the overall skill level in the class. You can tell a lot by looking into the students' eyes. Do they look bored or do they look stressed and overwhelmed? Listen for clues from their breathing, their breath. Are they breathing really heavy? Do you need to slow the class down a little bit? If they seem to be struggling with the pace, just adjust and add a little, make it a little slower, add a little break, a yin break. If they seem bored, then you can pick up the pace. It's important to be able to adjust and modify when needed. When we plan for a class and choose a flow and a pace to use, of course, we are intending to include all those wonderful asana poses that we included in our flow. Therefore, it is wise to manage our time during the class so we don't waste time, and being mindful to move along as you had planned. However, don't ever create stress and be in a hurry in order to get all the poses you wanted to into your time frame. Very often you'll be teaching a class and you won't get all those poses in, and it is okay. All us yoga instructors go through that. It is better to be present and mindful with the yoga practice than to hurry through poses in order to fit them all in to the time period. Mindful movement, responsiveness to the students, and guiding inner connection is more important than doing a lot of poses. Actually, practicing one pose with great attention, mindfulness, and presence in conscious embodiment is far better than an hour of 20 poses rushed through with a lack of presence. Another important aspect of pacing is to manage your class so that you begin and end your classes on time. Most people have busy lives and they expect you to begin and end the class as advertised so that they can get on with their next appointment or return home um, to their children or their family or return back to work on time. Keeping with time is very important to the overall integrity of the class. With pacing, we hold postures in ecstatic yoga. We also often invite you to take 3 deep breaths while holding those bandhas and allowing the prana, the energy, to build and to integrate. So this allows a student to integrate the pose, to become present in the pose, and it brings more benefit to hold the pose and the bandhas for a few breaths. There will, of course, be times where you may wish to lengthen or shorten the breath while holding a pose. So you might want to hold a pose for more breaths, or maybe just one breath. Sometimes it's fun to do a vinyasa style flow to breath. Therefore, you will be guiding the students more quickly in and out of the poses to add benefit of the pranayama to the flow. Also, there'll be times when you will create poses that you will invite students to stay longer in the pose, like in our yin or restorative, as well as asana flows and pranayama practices that include kumbhaka or breath retention, where we'll be holding the breath. When teaching a yin class, your pace is often slower in inviting students into a resting pose like child's pose to move into sensation and integration longer than a more yang class. It is very important to give people permission to release a pose or the breath, especially breath retention, at any time if needed. Anytime a student feels the need to come out of a pose earlier, they always have full permission to do that. No judgment. This isn't boot camp. This should be mentioned at the beginning of class, giving them full permission to release a pose or the breath and move into a resting pose like child's pose or down dog, or a savasana pose to restore at any time if they are needing that. And they can stay in a resting pose and rest a moment and then just come back and join the class. Also invite in students if they find if it's okay to be in their own pace, and they can feel free to stay a little longer in a pose. They're feeling really good and they're feeling the stretch isn't quite complete, it's not quite integrated. Allow them to stay a little longer or to do a few more repetitions if they need to do that. Always they can come out of a pose sooner. Always remind your students that yoga does not involve pain. And if pain occurs, to back up immediately from the pose and rest until the pain subsides. Always invite students to be responsible for their own bodies and never overextend themselves. We always want to learn about that playing the edge. We don't want to be real loosey-goosey. We certainly don't want to stretch that rubber band out so far that those tendons and muscles could snap and tear. Allow them to find their own pace and honor that pace as they go. And it's important to be responsive to your students. However, don't allow one student to direct the whole class. As long as the majority of your class are in sync with your flow and your timing, keep your flow going and trust that if someone needs rest in Savasana or to hold a pose a little longer, they will catch up. Don't disrupt the entire class for one student. Silently honor them in honoring their pace and their needs. And that is, of course, unless you are doing a one-on-one yoga practice, then you would want to give that student your full attention and completely honor their pace and be fully present to their needs. So let's move on to choreography. Below is a basic yoga class choreography outline. And this outline is just one example. And you can use this basic structure and simply change up the poses depending on the intention and theme of your class. Or you can modify the structure as you wish. These are just suggestions, and you're free to use the basic model to play and adjust and modify and create your own choreography. So I'm going to go over this basic choreography model. So we start with an opening. And some of the opening things we may do is invite the student to be here now, entering into presence. Invite them into mindful belly breathing, Dirga Pranayama, 3-part yogic breath. Invite them to set an intention for themselves. And invite them to scan the body, to let go of the external and dive within. And then some warm-ups, and some suggested warm-ups are neck rolls, pelvic grinds, seated twist, seated cat-cow, Baddha Konasana, some range of motion, and I think we said seated twist, breath and movement. And then our main asana practice. So this would have your main asana flow, whether it's a warrior flow, standing poses, sun salutation flow, hip opener flow, a floor flow, balancing flow, twists. And then releases. Some of our static yoga releases are hula and hip pointer and supine cat-cow, double knee drop, and single knee drop. And then relaxation. So offering them savasana, 2 to 3 minutes to guide students into deep relaxation. And then if you have 5 or more, maybe even 10 minutes, it's like a 90-minute class, you can allow them to bask in the deep relaxation and integration in silence. And then closing. Check in, invite them to check in and do another body scan. Inviting them to return back to their intention they set. And then a final blessing or prayer or group intention. And it's always lovely to end with namaste or a group om. And below are some timing options for choreographing a yoga class with time suggestions for a 30-minute, 60-minute, and 90-minute asana class. And these are also suggestions. So for a 30-minute class, we have 2 minutes for our opening. It's just 30 minutes. 5 minutes for our warm-up. 15 minutes for our main asana. 2 minutes for releases. 5 minutes for relaxation. And 1 minute to close. A 60-minute class. We have double the time. We can do a lot more. Opening, 5 minutes, warm-ups, 10, main asana practice, 35 minutes, releases, 4, relaxation savasana, 4, and closing, 2. So timing option for a 90-minute class, opening 5 minutes, warm-ups 15, main asana practice 45, releases 12, relaxation 12, and closing 1. I think we should put that relaxation 10 and closing 3. I'm going to change that. Relaxation 10 minutes. It just makes more sense. And then closing 3 minutes. Intention in choreographing a yoga class. So let's talk about that. Creating a yoga class around an intention allows the students to not only gain from the asana poses and all the benefits that they offer, but it also offers them to gain benefit from the class intention. There are many intentions as there are classes to teach. Some intentions I love to create are presence, inner peace, silent stillness, self-love, going within, connecting to the divine within, empowerment intentions, listening, being the light, being the love, etc., etc. It is great to have the intention to be positive and a yogic related or self-improvement related intention. For example, an intention to be a marketing genius, or how to handle gun control, or win a political debate. Those would not be intentions we'd be suggesting in a yoga class. It's pretty logical. However, the list of self-actualizing and positive personal growth in yoga-related intentions are endless. You are free to repeat intentions. I do often. Sometimes I create just minor changes in the title of the intention, but sometimes I use the same exact intention. As you've noticed, I use the intention of going within and self-love often. And I've called it different things, like diving within, basking in the inner nectar, connecting to pratyahara, resting in the being, the greatest love, fierce self-love, self-compassion, being the gentlest place to land. You're welcome to use any of these intentions, the intentions we use in ecstatic yoga, for sacred embodiment, self-love, from within. And you're welcome to, of course, create all of your own if you'd like. Often you may wish to have physical intentions for your class. So it could be a power flow intention or a stretching flow, hip opener flow, a balancing flow, a building strength flow, focusing the mind flow, mind-body connection flow. You may also want to create a class with an emotional intention, being joy flow, opening to love flow, standing in confidence flow, happiness flow, fulfillment flow, ecstatic flow, peace and tranquility flow, being the empowered warrior flow. You can create and offer flows with intentions for attention, for energizing, for focus and concentration, for presence and slowing down, awakening to what is arising, relaxation, grief release, stress relief, sensuality, sexuality, expressing your voice, chanting flows, inner child flows, prayer flows. Sky is truly the limit in offering and adding a special intention to your yoga, asana classes, and meditation classes. Other ways to use intention in a yoga class is you can use a class with the intention of lines of energy, focusing on the lines of intention. The flexibility, balance, strength, activating inner aliveness. You could use a group intention that you set at the beginning of the class that could be repeated and circled around throughout the entire class. So special target audiences. Classes will use different choreography even different intentions and sequencing and paces according to the audience. Most often in a traditional yoga class, the audience will be general, yet with a variety of people and levels and skill levels and ages. However, you may feel interested to teach a certain target audience. The audience will allow you the opportunity to be creative in creating classes that are directed to this audience specifically, and it would be a more narrow focus. For example, if you choose children to teach yoga to children and they become your audience, your class will be very different than if you were choosing a class for men in prison. You wouldn't have the men in prison barking and meowing as they're in their cat cow. So below are some possible audiences you may want to teach a yoga class in. Women, men, youth, including toddlers, school age, and teens, people struggling with addiction, prison population, the elderly population, handicapped individuals, people with similar injuries like back injuries or brain injuries or wheelchair bound, people recovering from injuries or physical conditions, people preparing for an event, marathons, a hiking season, dance performances, etc. So themes in choreographing a yoga class. There are many ways to create a yoga class, and creating a themed class that may not be asana or may just have 10 minutes of asana, but are focusing on other yoga related subjects and practices. Themed classes is a powerful way to add variety to your yoga classes. Some possible themed classes are a meditation class, a Kriya yoga and philosophy class, ecstatic dance, laughter yoga class, a samadhi journey class, pranayama practice or ecstatic breath work, ceremony, can offer ceremonies, mindfulness classes. Choreography, sequencing, and pace for these themed classes will be different from an asana class. Some possibilities for timing for these themed classes. So an hour meditation with, or an ecstatic breath work or a pranayama class. You could open and center for 5 minutes. You could include the meditation or breath work practice for 50 minutes, and then a closing for 5 minutes. If you wanted to add some asana practice in that, you could have an opening and centering for 5 minutes, 10 minutes of asana, 40 minutes of meditation or breath work, and 5 minutes for closing. So a Kriya philosophy class. So this is a timeline for a 1 hour Kriya without asana. And that would be 5-minute opening, 20-minute teaching, 20-minute discussion, 10-minute meditation, and 5 minutes closing. An hour Kriya philosophy class with some asana practice. You could do 5 minutes opening, 10-minute asana, 15-minute teaching, 15-minute discussion, 10-minute meditation, and 5-minute closing. This is all in your PDF, so you don't need to take notes or memorize any of this. An hour ceremony for timing. So you would want to create the sacred space prior to your students coming in for the ceremony. That's always done to set up the space, to do the prayers and the blessings. Still have Xander's hairs in my eyes a little. Set up the space, the candles, have everything all set up before they come. And they're coming for an hour ceremony. So the opening blessing would be 5 minutes, releasing ceremony 10, the setting intentions 10. Remembering you always want to do the releasing before you set the intentions. Invoking the intentions. Invoke the intentions into the plant medicine or the offering, whatever it is. That's 5 minutes. Taking the sacrament is 5 minutes. A celebration is 20. That's when you'll do a little breath work and some dancing and celebrating. And then the closing circle and sealing, 5 minutes. An hour samadhi journey. You would do an opening and centering for 5 minutes. The samadhi journey is 50 minutes. The closing is 5 minutes. And to do that with your asana, you're going to do asana with that. It would be opening and centering for 5 minutes. And then asana, 10 minutes. Samadhi journey, 40 minutes. Closing, 5 minutes. Your personal style. This is the fun part. Finding your voice in your style in creating yoga classes. You have within you a special gift that no one else in the entire universe has as a yoga teacher and as a human being. Only you can give. And that gift is you. You. You have a style of your own. And as you continue to awaken and nourish this gift within you, you will be a joyous and successful yoga instructor. This is something that awakens within you naturally as you practice teaching. And remembering, we are always a student of yoga. I am always a student of yoga. Everyone is a student of yoga, no matter how many years they've been practicing. And it's whether we've led a class or attended a yoga class, you're always a student. If you're in a class, you're a student, and when you're leading classes, you're a student. As you practice your unique voice and are true to yourself, your style will arise and emerge naturally, joyfully, ongoingly, and beautifully. Stay open to new and beautiful ways to awaken within you. New beautiful ways that just awaken and arise within you without any expectation and surprise. Follow your heart always, always, always. You may become drawn and interested in Kriya, in yogic philosophy, or even an area like Upanishads or Patanjali, the philosophy. Or you may feel drawn to ceremony, restorative yoga, or ecstatic dance. The field of yoga is vast, and it's far more depth than we could ever cover in even a lifetime, but especially not in a 200-hour yoga teacher training. So keep your heart open and find what inspires you and pulls your heart and bravely follow that path. Also, yoga may lead you to paths you hadn't previously known, or styles and forms of yoga that are revealed to you over time. Finding your style is a path of listening to and honoring your heart as it calls you to express your gifts and the vibrations that dwell within you. And when you express those gifts joyfully out to the world, that joy will come back to you tenfold. Thank you for being here in this class and sequencing a pace and choreography of a yoga class. I am Grace with Ecstatic Yoga, staticyoga.studio. Check out our yoga teacher trainings and retreats. Thank you and wishing you a beautiful day. Namaste.